In 2022, a Midjourney-generated image titled Théâtre d'Opéra Spatial won first place at the Colorado State Fair Fine Arts competition. The human artists who lost filed protests. The judges ruled that the rules had not prohibited AI entries. 1 year later, the Borusan Istanbul Philharmonic Orchestra performed a symphony composed by an AI system to a paying audience in Istanbul. In 2024, Japanese author Rie Kudan won the Akutagawa Prize, one of Japan's two most prestigious literary awards, and publicly confirmed that roughly 5% of her winning novel came directly from ChatGPT output. The auction houses followed. In 2021, a digital artwork by the AI-assisted artist Beeple sold at Christie's for $69.3 million. In November 2024, Sotheby's sold a portrait by the robotic artist Ida for $1.08 million. Neither sale triggered serious institutional resistance. The market had already decided these events are not warnings about a future collision between human creativity and machine capability. They are the record of one that already occurred. What remains is the harder question, not whether AI can create, but what human creativity is worth when it can. For most of recorded history, originality was treated as the most distinctly human of capacities. Philosophers from Aristotle to Kant constructed entire frameworks around it. Economists classified creative workers as the most insulated from automation. The logic seemed airtight. Machines could handle repetition, but originality required a mind. By 2024, that logic had been empirically stress-tested. The results are uncomfortable. In 2024, researchers at the University of Arkansas published a study in Scientific Reports. They recruited 151 human participants and measured their performance against GPT-4 across 3 standardized tests of divergent thinking. The cognitive framework psychologist J.P. Guilford introduced in 1950 to quantify creative potential. Divergent thinking tasks ask subjects to generate as many novel, varied uses for an object as possible, or to identify unexpected connections between unrelated concepts. They are among the most validated instruments in creativity research. GPT-4 outperformed the human participants on originality and elaboration in every test. Independent human evaluators, blind to which responses came from the machine, rated the AI's answers as more original and more thoroughly developed than those produced by the 151 humans. Not in aggregate, in every test. This result requires precision to interpret. The study measured a specific capacity, producing responses that trained evaluators score highly on established rubrics for novelty and elaboration. It did not measure wisdom, cultural resonance, or lived experience. But those limits do not soften the core finding. The instrument psychologists built specifically to quantify creative potential, trusted for over 70 years, now rates a language model above most humans. A separate 2023 study in the same journal found that ChatGPT scored higher than 91% of human participants on the Torrance tests of creative thinking developed by psychologist E. Paul Torrance in 1966, and still the most widely used standardized creativity assessment in the world. Not competitive with the median human, competitive with the near ceiling of human performance. These benchmarks shaped policy, hiring, and economic forecasting for decades. In 2013, Oxford researchers Carl Benedict Fry and Michael Osborne estimated that 47% of US jobs faced high automation risk and placed creative professionals at the protected end of the spectrum. The underlying assumption was that creativity could not be automated. By 2024, the empirical foundation of that assumption had collapsed. The scale of adoption confirms the performance shift. Adobe's Firefly AI image generator crossed 1 billion generated images within 3 months of its 2023 commercial launch. Midjourney reported 16 million users by 2024. Music generation platform Suno saw users produce over 10 million tracks within months of its public release. These numbers do not emerge from niche experimentation. They emerge when a technology has crossed a performance threshold that makes adoption rational. Creativity is not one thing. This is a structural fact with measurable consequences. Psychologists distinguish between at least two separable dimensions. The first is the quality of individual creative output, how original, how elaborated, how surprising a single idea is. The second is the diversity of ideas across a population, how varied the collective pool of creative work is, how many different directions human imagination is simultaneously exploring. These two dimensions can move independently. They can move in opposite directions. This distinction is where the AI picture fractures. In 2025, researchers affiliated with the Wharton School published findings in Nature, examining how AI tools affect creative output at the group level. ChatGPT improved the quality of individual ideas, consistent with the University of Arkansas results. Users assisted by AI produced ideas rated as more original than those produced without it. By the individual quality metric, the tool worked. Across groups, something different happened. When multiple people used the same AI system to assist their brainstorming, their ideas converged. The more teams relied on AI, the more similar their outputs became to each other. The variance, the spread of ideas across a population contracted. Individual peaks rose, collective diversity fell. Wharton professor Christian Terwiesch framed the structural consequence directly. If an organization relies on ChatGPT as its primary creative resource, the outputs will eventually become too similar to each other to generate genuine novelty at the system's level. The danger is not silence. The danger is sameness. This matters because breakthrough innovation does not emerge from a single high-quality idea. It emerges from many different ideas exploring different territories simultaneously. Charles Darwin and Alfred Russel Wallace arrived at natural selection independently in 1858 precisely because the intellectual ecosystem of Victorian science was diverse enough for the same territory to be explored along multiple independent paths. Convergence in creative culture is not a minor inefficiency. It threatens the process by which genuinely new thinking enters the world. AI systems generating this convergence are not designed to produce sameness. They are designed to produce quality. But quality, as measured by human evaluators trained on existing cultural norms, is itself a form of trained consensus. A large language model learns what humans have historically rewarded and produces more of it. This makes AI output consistently competent. It also makes AI output structurally conservative at the distributional level, oriented toward the center of what human culture has already valued, rather than toward the unexplored periphery where the next significant shift originates. Adoption arrived faster than any framework for its consequences. By early 2024, an Adobe survey found that 51% of creative professionals globally were already using generative AI tools in their work. Among those under 35, the figure rose to 68%. These were not passive observers. They were illustrators, copywriters, musicians, designers, and filmmakers, the people whose livelihoods were most directly implicated, and the majority had already integrated the tools into daily workflows. The reasons are concrete. A freelance illustrator who previously spent 4 hours producing a single concept image can now generate 20 variations in under an hour. A composer working to a commercial deadline can produce a rough backing track in minutes rather than days. Accenture estimated in 2023 that generative AI could affect 40% of all working hours globally across all sectors, with creative and knowledge work Among the most heavily impacted categories, a significant counter-movement formed in parallel. In 2023, the Writers Guild of America struck for 148 days, partly over AI use in script development. The Screen Actors Guild joined with its own strike, citing digital likeness rights and AI voice cloning as central concerns. The combined strikes caused an estimated $6.5 billion in economic damage to the California entertainment industry. These were the largest coordinated labor actions in Hollywood since 1960, and they produced contractual language, incomplete but precedent-setting, on AI use in production. The tension inside the creative community reflects a genuine division. Some creators treat AI as equivalent to Photoshop or Pro Tools, instruments that change production landscapes without eliminating the human role of conception and direction. Others treat it as categorically different, a system capable of replacing not just the execution of creative work, but the generation of ideas behind it. Both positions contain accurate observations. Freelance writing platform Upwork reported in 2023 that demand for certain writing categories dropped by double digits following ChatGPT's wide release. Stock image platforms saw licensing revenue decline after the arrival of Midjourney and Stable Diffusion. The compression of entry-level creative labor markets is already visible in the data. The financial architecture of creative industries is being rebuilt faster than its labor implications can be absorbed. In 2023, the global generative AI market was valued at 44.89 billion. Grandview Research projected that figure would reach $607.96 billion by 2032, a compound annual growth rate of 35.6%. Capital is moving into AI-assisted creative production at a rate no existing regulatory or contractual framework is equipped to address. Getty Images filed suit against Stability AI in 2023, alleging the company used over 12 million licensed photographs without permission to train its image generation model. The New York Times filed suit against OpenAI and Microsoft in December 2023, alleging copyright infringement at scale. In 2023, a viral track using AI-generated voices mimicking Drake and The Weeknd accumulated millions of streams before Universal Music Group forced its removal. The Digital Millennium Copyright Act of 1998 was not written with generative AI in mind. Federal legislation addressing AI-generated likenesses, the No Fakes Act, was proposed in 2024 but had not been enacted as of early 2025. The SAG-AFTRA strikes produced contracts including provisions on digital likeness rights and consent requirements for AI voice replication. Duncan Crabtree Ireland, SAG-AFTRA's National Executive Director, stated at the 2025 World Economic Forum that whether AI becomes a genuine asset or a tool for exploitation in creative industries depends entirely on choices made in the near term. Choices about consent, compensation, and contractual rights that remain unresolved. New roles have emerged alongside the disruption. Prompt engineering, constructing precise inputs to AI systems to produce specific outputs, appeared as a marketable skill by 2023, with some technology firms advertising senior prompt engineer salaries at $300,000. AI art direction and AI music supervision have become recognized job categories at major production companies. The market is not static, it is restructuring. But restructuring does not guarantee equity of outcome. The writers, illustrators, voice actors, and musicians whose existing work trained the models generating this new economy were not compensated for that training data. The legal resolution of the Getty and Times suits will determine whether economic gains from AI-assisted creation distribute broadly or accumulate narrowly. That resolution has not arrived. Not all creative labor faces equivalent exposure. The risk follows a discernible structure. Tasks that are primarily generative, producing first drafts, generating variations, executing specified formats, are the most directly replaceable by current AI systems. Tasks that are evaluative, directional, or culturally situated, deciding which draft is right, understanding why a piece of music will land with a specific audience at a specific historical moment, identifying when AI output contains a subtle but consequential error, remain dependent on human judgment in ways that are structural, not incidental. A 2025 paper from the University of Bristol, published on ARXIV, found that AI tools were most effective in creative workflows when human oversight remained active throughout the process. Without active human direction, AI-generated creative work accumulated inaccuracies, tonal inconsistencies, and cultural misreadings that only trained human evaluators reliably caught. The human role shifted from generator to director, but the role did not dissolve. This identifies the most durable creative capacity. Knowing what is wrong, AI systems trained on existing human output are oriented, by construction, toward what has already been valued. A language model will produce confident-sounding prose whether or not the underlying claim is accurate. A music generation system will produce emotionally credible compositions whether or not they suit the specific context. A visual generation system will produce technically polished images whether or not they respect the cultural significance of what they depict. The gap between surface competence and genuine understanding is precisely where current AI systems structurally fail. What this means for the creative workforce is a specific reallocation. The tasks that contract are those defined by volume and execution. The tasks that persist are those defined by discernment, cultural context, and accountability. A staff illustrator producing generic website graphics faces a different threat than a creative director whose role is to determine what a brand communicates over the next decade. The difficulty is structural. The economy of creative work has historically operated as a pipeline. Junior roles provide training grounds for senior ones. If AI eliminates entry-level generative work, that pipeline breaks. The senior creative roles requiring discernment and cultural depth are produced by careers that begin with execution. Remove the execution layer, and the pipeline that produces senior creative judgment is starved at its source. Neither adoption advocates nor labor organizers have resolved this problem. What survives is not some quality of human creativity immune to computation. What survives is the set of capacities that require genuine understanding of what a specific piece of work is for, its audience, its cultural stakes, its historical placement, its ethical weight. These capacities require direct experience with the world outside any training data set. They take years to develop. They cannot be compressed into a loss function without losing what makes them valuable. An AI system in 2025 can outperform 91% of humans on the Torrance tests. It cannot tell you whether the resulting idea should exist. It cannot account for what happens to the community that encounters it. It cannot be held responsible for what it gets wrong. Human creativity in this landscape is not defined by the ability to generate. It is defined by the capacity to be accountable, to stand behind a choice, to understand its consequences, and to carry the judgment that machines, by design, cannot. That is a narrower role than creativity has historically occupied. It is not a small one.